Hello and welcome to Yes, You Are Brave. This is a podcast where we are going to set off on a journey together to find and build our brave, where we explore all the ways that you have been brave and all the ways that you can be brave again. Because even though we may have forgotten or we may have fallen out of practice, we're all brave. And I'm on a mission to prove it and help you believe that yes, you are brave. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Yes, You Are Brave. I'm Pawnee, and I am super excited that you are here. Today, we are going to talk about something that we don't always talk about in a very positive light. But I want to kind of challenge that thinking, and maybe we can think about it a little differently. Maybe we can do maybe a little bit better in this particular situation. So today, we are going to talk about being brave enough to make mistakes. And I know some of you are thinking, but Pawnee, I don't like to make mistakes. Mistakes cost me time, they cost me money, they cost me peace of mind, all of these things. But I think that it is important to maybe change our thinking about mistakes, because I think that there is a struggle that a lot of us have with making mistakes, or this fear of making mistakes, that we don't actually do what we need to do because we are afraid of making mistakes. And I think it's funny that we sometimes don't realize that that's what we're actually afraid of. We are afraid of making mistakes, and so we don't do anything. We allow our fear to control our lives. And I think that comes from some of us adopting this perfectionist mindset. And I know that for me that this has been an issue for a long time. I always said, I'm kind of an all or nothing person, or I like to, give 110%, whatever. And that's true. I do like to give something my all. But I was also, what I now realize is I was this perfectionist who I felt like if I couldn't give it everything, that I didn't want to give it anything. And I realize now that was just me being afraid of failing, me being afraid of making mistakes, because somewhere along the line, I had become afraid of mistakes. And I'm not exactly sure where that came from. There was some insecurities in like junior high-ish that made me not want to ever be seen. And I think that sometimes that comes from that. We don't want to be seen. We don't want to be ridiculed. So we do everything that we can to not make mistakes and not draw attention to ourselves. But then I think once we become adults, it's a whole different game. I realize that sometimes, especially growing up and in high school, kids are mean. Let's just be real. Kids are mean. And it can be a survival mode. But once we get to be adults, we carry over some of these things from high school that we don't necessarily need and that don't really serve us at all. And so I think that maybe it's time to shift our mindset about mistakes. I know for a long time I didn't want to do anything if I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. If I didn't know 16, 18 steps ahead, if it was going to work out, I didn't want to do it because I was just so terrified of making mistakes. Now, I didn't realize that was actually what was going on at the time, but now I can see clearly I was just afraid of making mistakes. And I didn't want to start something that I didn't feel like I could finish because I didn't want to be perceived as a quitter because I was taught not to be a quitter. And I think a lot of us are in that same boat. And I think for me, I know that comes from when I was young. Our parents, we could do whatever sport we wanted, but the rule was that if you started the season, you had to finish the season. And I think that is a great thing for kids, and I don't regret that at all. But I feel like sometimes I took things, or I take things a little bit more extreme than they need to be, where my parents were teaching me, okay, you start something, you finish it. Kind of got internalized to if I start anything, I've got to finish it, go completely all the way through. And so for a long time, I felt like I was really struggling to make decisions about my life because I felt like once I started something as an adult, then that meant that was what I was doing for a very long time, and I didn't want to commit to some of those things. I was and still am a little bit afraid of commitment. But it was just like, wait a minute, well, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I head down the wrong road and I hate it? But then sometimes you realize sometimes I think we have to go down the wrong road to know that it's the wrong road. We have to at least start down the wrong road to realize, wait a minute, this is not at all what I want. This is not what makes me happy. This is not what, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like what I want. And I think that is something that we need to take into account, and we need to realize and acknowledge that sometimes we need to go down the wrong road to know that it's the wrong road. Because sometimes we're always going to wonder. And I know sometimes also with the whole perfectionist thing, people say that like it's a great thing. Like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. Like, I have to have everything just so. And I think that that's fine if you need things just so. But I also feel like that is, for me at least, my perfectionism was my fear. It was my fear taking on another name, and it was my fear masquerading as something else and making it seem like it was a good thing, when really it was just my fear trying to hold me back and keep me from failing and making mistakes, because I was just so afraid of making mistakes. I didn't want to choose a major because what if I didn't like it, and what if I got into a career that I didn't like? And it's been a whole process. Now, and I've had friends along the way that I feel like they have kind of just almost barreled through life. Like, they start down one way and they're going full force, gung-ho, and then they switch directions, and then they're going somewhere else, and then they're doing this. And I've always a little bit jealous of those friends that were doing that seemed to just go for what they wanted. And if they realized that that's not what they wanted partway through, then they would just change directions, and it was like they didn't even hardly bat an eye. Of course, they probably did. I just didn't see it. But they just went for what they thought they wanted. And if it turned out that that's not what they wanted, then they would just change directions and go in a different way. And like I said, I've been at different points in my life very, I guess, jealous or envious of these people who just live life with such confidence. They're going to go into this, whatever it is, and if it's a mistake, then it's a mistake, and we'll fix it later. Kind of reminds me of a choir teacher I had in college, and she said, "No, I want you to sing loud." She says, "It's better to be loud and wrong than be quiet and correct, because if you're loud and wrong, then I know it's wrong and we can fix it." She says, "If you're singing quiet and you're singing it wrong, then I don't know. So I want you to sing out. I want you to sing loud. If it's wrong, I want to hear it, and that way we can fix it." And I think that that's a great way to look at mistakes, is if you don't know that you're making mistakes, if you're not singing loud enough for people to hear, particularly your teacher who is sitting there guiding you and can correct you in practice, if you're not singing loud enough to actually hear the mistakes, then later, guess what? When you actually have to sing louder at the concert, then you're going to sing loud and it's going to be wrong. And it's a whole different thing. But making mistakes, especially in those controlled environments, like a practice, like a rehearsal, that's the place to make mistakes. And you make them loud and you make them proud so that, oh, okay. And then she can say, oh, you know what? That one's a little off. Let's fix it. And I think that that's a great way to think about mistakes. Like I said, as somebody who has just been kind of terrified to make mistakes for a good chunk of my life. And there are reasons behind it. And I don't know if some of them are even valid, but I think that as adults, we need to learn that it's okay to make mistakes still. Because, we teach kids, especially when I was a teacher, I used to, it's okay to make mistakes. My kids were like, well, what's the right answer? What do you want me to say? I'm like, no, I want you to think. I don't want you to necessarily have a right answer. I just want you to think. But as adults, we do sometimes do that too. We think, oh, we're the adult. We need to have it figured out. We need to not be making mistakes at this point in our lives because we've decided in our mind that there's some random number that says, okay, by this point in your life, you should have things figured out and you shouldn't be making these big mistakes anymore or even little mistakes anymore. But I think mistakes are just part of living. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us interesting, honestly. So I have a different friend who we have been friends forever. And something she said to me recently just kind of it rang so true, and just like the way that she said it and just made me see things in a whole new light. She says, I didn't make mistakes, I made choices. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is so profound. We don't make mistakes, we make choices. And sometimes those choices they're the best thing for us, and sometimes they're not. But our choices, yes, they determine who we are and who we're going to be, but I think it's also not just the first choice that we make that determines who we are and what we're going to be, but the choices that we make, the subsequent choices that we make, the choices we make after the initial one or after we realize that, oh, wait, maybe this was a mistake. I think that those choices that we make after that are also more important. So there is this book, it's called The Traveler's Gift by Andy Andrews, and I found it a couple of years ago, actually when I was looking for a different book in a secondhand shop. But it is amazing, and it's talking about decisions for success. And in the first decision, which is the buck stops here, there's something that he says. This character, this is actually supposed to be the character of President Truman, actually. But anyway, so it says in this one, the first decision, it says, when faced with the opportunity to make a decision, I will make one. I understand that God did not put in me the ability to always make right decisions. He did, however, put in me the ability to make a decision and then make it right. And I want you to think about that for a moment. Whether you believe in God or not, or the universe, whatever it is, didn't necessarily get the ability to always make the right decisions, but you did get the ability to make a decision and then make it right. So if you make a decision and you start down a road and you realize, wait a minute, this is not for me, then you have the ability to make that decision again, or to do what you need to do to make that decision right. A couple years ago, it was the year my dad died, I had taken some time off of any kind of work, really, and I was pursuing other things. And then once school started, I had started subbing because I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And even though I didn't want to be in the classroom anymore, subbing was just a great way to make money without like the long-term commitments. And then I found this job that I thought I was really going to love, mostly because it came with some benefits, some travel benefits that I was really excited about. Well, I started working at this job. I started the training. It was like a ridiculous training program. It was a customer service program or customer service job, but the training was like a couple of months. And so I got into this, and I was probably like 3 weeks in, and I took my first like mock call, right? Where the trainers call you and you do the whole thing, whatever. And then I realized, wait a minute, what the heck? I hate talking on the phone. Like, I don't know if I was like, wait a minute, do I really want to do this? Because I don't know. And because I don't like talking on the phone. And then I was like, oh, no, it's just something new. I was like, maybe this was just me being fearless, right? Or not thinking things through. And so I stayed with it until I was there for 2.5 months. I actually got to the point in my training where they let us take calls on our own. Well, we had trainers there with us, but we were taking calls from actual customers, not just trainers pretending to be customers. And it was fine at first. And I thought, oh yeah, no. But it reached a point where I was like, this isn't fun. This isn't what I want to do. And first of all, I do hate talking on the phone. And second of all, these systems are so complicated that it is insane. It is ridiculous and impossible to keep them all straight. And I was not happy. And I was not in a place mentally or emotionally where I did well with people yelling at me all day, every day. And so for the first time in my life, that was probably one of the first times in my life where I realized this is not what I want. And I didn't sit in it for a very long time. A lot of my other decisions, I hemmed and hawed about them, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I should wait. This one, no, I was like, no, I need to be done with this. I can't handle this right now. This is the wrong road for me. And I had a meeting already scheduled with my manager for, I don't know, some check-in, something or other. And so I was like, well, I'll just talk to her about it then. And so like less than a week later, I went in and talked to my manager, told her what was going on, kind of what I was thinking and feeling, and, told her I just didn't feel like this was where I needed to be. Didn't feel like I could handle it at this point in my life. And she's like, okay, like, do you want to finish the shift or do you just want to be done? And I was like, part of me was like, I can't be a quitter. I have to finish the shift, or I have to give 2 weeks. And I was like, you know what? I'd be happy to not have to get back out on the phones. And so she just printed papers and I quit my job right there and I went home early. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily regret that job and those 2 months that I spent there. I don't regret it, but it would be very easy for me to say that it was a mistake. But it was also, mistakes are also opportunities to learn and to grow, right? If we always do something, if we're always doing exactly what we need to be doing and we're never making mistakes, then we don't really have a chance to learn. I know when I was a teacher and I was working with another math teacher, there were times when she would have kids do the problems on the board. Not a lot, but just every once in a while. And she says, I actually like it when they make mistakes better, because then I can show them where they made mistakes and I can help them fix them. And I think that is the way to look at mistakes, is that they are a learning experience. And the more you put yourself out there, the more technically mistakes you're going to make, or you can think of it as the more opportunities you're going to find to learn. Because it also says in this book, at one point, it says that failure is, you only fail if you stop trying. And so mistakes aren't final unless we stop trying. So this week I would challenge you, and kind of coming up to this transition time in the year and all of that, to maybe shift your thinking about mistakes. Maybe you feel like you don't want to try anymore because you're tired of making mistakes. But is your thinking that like there is a right answer? Or are you thinking, okay, there's lots of right answers, I just have to find the one that works best for me? Because when it comes right down to it, there is no one answer, right? There's no right or wrong answer that fits everybody. Your path is going to be your own, and it's going to be different from everybody else's. And it may take some false starts. It may take some wrong roads for you to get to that point where you feel like, okay, this is what feels best for me in my life right now and for my future. And the only way to get there is through some mistakes. And I realize it can be hard to allow yourself the grace to make mistakes, because we are hardest on ourselves after all. But when we do that, when we're brave enough to make the mistakes and give ourselves grace and be patient with ourselves as we make those mistakes, we can have some of the most amazing learning experiences of our lives. And it can be a great thing to have and a great thing to do. So remember that you are awesome and you are wonderful and you are amazing. And you know what? It's okay to not be perfect all the time. It's okay to start something and realize, I hate this. I don't want to do this forever, and change directions. It's okay to make choices and then have to correct those choices later. Because mistakes are just opportunities for you to learn and to grow into more of the person that you want to be. So this week, live boldly and live bravely, and don't be afraid of making those mistakes. Give yourself some grace, give yourself some love, and just move forward. And if you have to fix it, then you have to fix it. It's okay. You can do that as well. Hope you have a fantastical week. And remember that, yes, you are brave enough to make mistakes. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed what you've heard today,
please leave a review down below and share this with anyone that you feel like could use a little more brave in their life. And if you'd like to follow more of my journey to be brave, you can follow me on social media and the link down below. Have a fantastic day and don't forget to be brave.